If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, the only thing you need to say yes to is getting premium wireless for $15 a month. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/weirdest. That's mintmobile.com/weirdest. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Therapy in this economy? Yes, it's possible. Grow Therapy makes care more affordable, more flexible, and way easier to access. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/weirdest today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/weirdest. growtherapy.com/weirdest. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
At Popular Science, we report and write dozens of science and tech stories every week. And while most of the stuff we stumble across makes it into our articles, we also find plenty of weird facts that we just keep around the office. So we figured, why not share those with you? Welcome to The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week from the editors of Popular Science.
I'm Rachel Feltman.
I'm Jess Bodie.
And I'm Liz Clayton Fuller.
Liz, welcome back to the show. It's always so great to have you.
Thank you. Just keep having me on. I will keep coming back.
Our weird bird correspondent.
Mm-hmm,
Yes.
That's me.
So on The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week, we start by offering up a little tease about a fact or story we found in the course of reading, writing, reporting, etc., and decide which one we just absolutely have to hear more about first. Then once we've all had time to spin our little science yarns, we reconvene and decide what the weirdest thing we learned this week actually was. Jess, what's your tease?
Rabbits are growing horns, and that's actually not really that scary if you know what's up. And also, I'm going to tie it back to Elden Ring.
Shocking.
I know.
Shocked.
How did I know that was coming?
Yeah, I know. Shocking.
Liz, what's your tease?
My tease is how two women put an end to the deadly feather trade and why those ladies are the reason that you can't keep feathers that you find when you're hiking.
Well,
You can't?
Nope.
I did not know
We'll talk
that.
about it. It's okay if you didn't know, but that is true.
Well, cool. My tease is, what is this? Yogurt for ants? No, don't be silly. It's yogurt from ants.
Oh,
Ant yogurt.
brother. Ew?
Yeah, I'll start because
Yep.
what the heck?
Agreed.
So the study came out in September in the journal iScience that showed how this traditional recipe for yogurt used a kind of unusual, funky secret ingredient to kickstart the fermentation process: ants. So first, a quick refresher on what yogurt is. So basically, yogurt happens when microorganisms break down the lactose in some kind of milk. They produce lactic acid while they're doing that. And that does a couple of things. It thickens up the dairy, and then it also makes that signature tangy flavor that any, traditional unflavored yogurt will have. And the cool thing about yogurt is that it was probably discovered accidentally and repeatedly just wherever people domesticated animals for their milk. It happened probably when you just happened to get the right bacteria in there while dairy was sitting around, which dairy was wont to do before you had refrigerators and stuff. And one common theory is that people would carry around milk in bags made from goat stomachs or other animal skins, and that had some nice, microflora on it that got the job done. Another idea I've read is that some of the helpful microorganisms for creating yogurt tend to live on plants. And so maybe animals' udders would get this bacteria on them from brushing up against grass and stuff like that. And then that would get into the milk. And up until the 1900s, yogurt was a staple in many diets, but it was pretty regionally specific. Central Asia and the Caucasus, Western Asia, Southeastern Europe and the Balkans, Central Europe, and the Indian subcontinent all had loads of yogurt, loved yogurt. And then around the turn of the 20th century, this Bulgarian medical student in Geneva, he actually looked at the microflora in Bulgarian yogurt, and he basically described this like rod-like bacteria that made lactic acid. And people were generally getting interested in yogurt at this time. There were some researchers in Paris who were looking at this guy's research on the Bulgarian yogurt and were like, Bulgarian peasants live a long time. Could it be this weird stuff they eat that's yogurt? And that kind of, yeah, people started getting into the idea that maybe eating yogurt would make them live longer. In 1919, we started to have our first industrialized production of yogurt. This guy in Barcelona, he named the business Danone after his son Daniel. It was like a pet name for Daniel, which of course became Dannon.
Oh.
Yeah. Fun fact.
What?
Wow. Danone.
And pod favorite Kellogg, who had a lot of weird feelings about constipation and fiber, he loved a yogurt enema. So he also really helped popularize yogurt in the US. I think he also was into the idea of eating it for your health, but the yogurt enemas loom large in my mind. So basically, once people outside of these regions where it was traditional got into yogurt, commercial production followed not long after, and that sort of led to us honing in on a couple of bacterial species and really relying on those to make all of our yogurt for like consistency and safety. Because as anybody who's had like a wild ale or like wild sourdough or something knows, if you're relying on just ambient microflora, you don't actually really know what you're going to get at any given time. So it makes sense that we narrowed the scope and ambitions of our yogurt. But the downside is that there were tons of traditional regional methods that fell by the wayside. And one of those was a traditional practice from the Balkans and Turkey involving ants. So the authors of this new study decided to take a closer look at the ant yogurt recipe. And apparently this all started because some food scientists / chefs at like 2 Michelin star restaurant in Copenhagen, they'd been working with ants as like a funky, adventurous gastronomy ingredient. And there was like some milk that had an ant in it, and they noticed it started to curdle in the fridge, and they were like, interesting. And so they got in touch with some researchers also in Copenhagen, and they were like, oh, for sure. We are also interested in why this dairy is turning into yogurt thanks to ant. And I will say, just side note for anyone who hasn't been to Copenhagen, they do have an insanely good adventurous food scene, because Noma, which is like the archetypal like fancy futuristic restaurant, is there. It's closing soon, I think. But anyway, basically all these people like moved to Copenhagen specifically to become chefs at a Michelin star restaurant. And then a bunch of them have opened their own places over time. So including ones that aren't like fancy. Like I had the best burger of my life at a like Noma offshoot. And that's dope. So anyway, go eat food in Copenhagen indoors.
Isn't there that whole episode of The Bear where the guy goes to like learn how to do pastry in Copenhagen? Is that Copenhagen?
That sounds familiar.
Or is it Amsterdam? He goes
it
somewhere.
Might be Amsterdam.
I don't know. It's over there somewhere.
But go to Copenhagen. They're making yogurt out of ants and having a good time.
Yeah.
And this was at the restaurant Alchemist, by the way, if you're curious, which I think is very fancy. So if you want to go there, you probably have to plan your trip around it. So these researchers, they wanted to test the hypothesis that you can use the ant holobionte to ferment yogurt. A holobionte is a word I'd never heard before, but it refers to like the being and its microbial communities. So like you and your microbiome are a holobionte.
Me and all my friends.
Yeah, exactly. And they started working with one of the study co-authors, who's a doctoral student at the University of Munich, who had been gathering oral histories from people in Turkey and Bulgaria about different methods of creating yogurt. So basically, this cookie restaurant ended up getting a research dream team to investigate yogurt from ants. And yeah, her paper had referred to this traditional Balkan ant yogurt recipe. And so the researchers got together and they actually went to this co-author's family village in Bulgaria. And apparently, like, people weren't actively making ant yogurt there, but they like had a recent enough oral history of it to be like, sure, we can help you figure out how the heck they did that. So they're in this Bulgarian village. They take 4 ants. They were redwood ants, put them in a jar of warm milk, cover it with a piece of cheesecloth. Then this part I really like. It's really using the whole animal. They buried it in an ant mound overnight because the heat of the colony's activity is perfect for incubating fermentation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then the next day, they took the sample out and it already showed signs that it was fermenting. The milk was coagulating. It was becoming more acidic. It had a slightly sour taste. So they also took it back to the lab and did some additional ant in dairy experiments to figure out what was happening. And first of all, they found that redwood ants naturally carry lactic acid bacteria on them. So perfect. They're introducing lactic acid. They also carry acetic acid bacteria, like the kind of bacteria that you might use to make vinegar, including a strain that's really similar to what's used in commercial sourdough starters. So they had everything you needed to get fermentation going, including apparently the formic acid that ants make as a defense mechanism actually lowers the milk's pH, which probably helps create an ideal environment for these bacteria to thrive.
Wait, that's so cool. They're little yogurt machines.
Yeah, exactly. They bring all the bacteria you need, and they also set the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The hive's the perfect temp, you know.
Yeah, what the heck, man?
Yeah, they're ready to go.
How did this happen?
Well, and I am really curious about how one figured this out, right? It's like the sort of very basic, some bacteria from a plant or an animal skin got into the milk. That's like not hard to imagine. And I guess ants falling into milk and interesting stuff happening isn't hard to imagine either, but somebody had to be paying attention.
Yeah.
So yeah, the researchers then, like I said, they had already been partnering with the chefs and food scientists at Alchemist, and they ended up actually using these ant cultures to create stuff for the menu. They had an ant witch, which was an ice cream sandwich. It had sheep yogurt made from live ants in the starter culture. And the ant
is wild.
Yeah. And the sandwich was shaped like an ant.
Oh, that's cute. That's cute. Come on.
It had to be.
They said it was good. Everybody who talked about the flavor of the yogurt, including, I'll link to this on popsci.com/weird, but a contributor for The Guardian read this study and was like, I must try it for myself. And she says the yogurt was good, and everything the researcher said in the paper said that it was good. Apparently the diners enjoyed the various ant yogurt things they were given at Alchemist. But yeah, it's like, it tastes like yogurt.
Yeah, I'd be so curious, like how it differs, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think it depends on, as is always the case with yogurt, it depends on the milk you're using and how long you ferment it and stuff. And they talked about some like specific flavor notes. Apparently with the sheep ice cream, it had a distinct acidity that contrasted really well with the fat of the milk. They also made a goat milk mascarpone, and that texture, they said, was like the right sort of soft cheese texture. But they said the flavor was very aromatic. It was more like a mature pecorino cheese.
Oh.
And then one of their favorites was a milk wash cocktail that they made. So for listeners who don't know and don't live in cities where people sell you $25 cocktails, milk wash cocktails actually date back to like the 1700s, but they are recently newly trendy. And basically there's milk there's some kind of dairy in the cocktail, but they curdle it usually by adding acid, like lemon juice or something. And then you filter it. So you're getting rid of the dairy solids. So you have this like clarified dairy. So it adds like the the richness and the body of a milk, but without actually drinking straight milk in your cocktail.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've had one of those.
Yeah, I think I've had one. And it was good.
I'm kind of curious. I want to try it.
Yeah, I feel like the reason I haven't had them more is because it does tend to be on the more exorbitant end of cocktail offerings.
I've definitely had cocktails with like the egg whites and stuff in it. That's definitely more common. But like this is I'm intrigued.
I'm trying to picture what it looks like, and I cannot.
It's really, if you watch the process of someone making one, it's definitely like fascinating and weird, but once you receive it, it's been strained, so it doesn't look any different from a regular cocktail.
Yeah. I will be going on a YouTube adventure later.
Yeah.
In this case, they used dehydrated ants to do the curdling, so to make the milk separate so they could strain it out. And they said it was great. They said it had really fruity notes that was from the other ingredients. So, but they did note that. And they said the residual milk whey, made it nice and silky the way it's supposed to. But they said that the ants, as opposed to the usual citrus, it came out with a more mild acidity, and that they think that the flavor amplified the fruity notes of the cocktail. So like very successful. And one of the study's co-authors, I think one of the ones who's actually like works at Alchemist, was quoted as saying, this is all about the holobiont thing, because if you take one microorganism, the way commercial yogurt might have one or two specific bacterial strains, it's going to make a very specific compound aromatically, taste-wise. But if you're using like a whole bouquet of microorganisms that, say, a sourdough starter has, or that ants carry with them, then you're getting a lot more like synergy and variety. So it's less controllable, but you're going to end up with a more interesting flavor profile at the end. You shouldn't go digging around for ants to do this yourself. The researchers warned that ants can carry parasites, and some of them do carry parasites that can harm humans. They did extra steps in the lab to make sure they were filtering out any potentially dangerous microorganisms. So don't do that unless you have a really knowledgeable Bulgarian uncle or something. And even then, that's probably at your own risk. But I would trust a knowledgeable Bulgarian uncle who loved ant yogurt to keep me safe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust any of my personal uncles, but yeah.
I really wanted to find some other like very weird historical traditional yogurt making methods, and it seems like this might be the weirdest. But the paper does mention some of the other ones we know of. Like I said, that co-author had done oral histories about yogurt, because that sort of bouquet of bacteria that colonize the milk and establish the fermentation ecosystem can come from really anywhere. So a lot of cultures, even historically, were produced by what we call backslopping, which sounds so gross, but it's just when you take a little bit of already cultured yogurt and use it to culture the next yogurt.
Got it.
So
they could have picked
I know.
Literally anything else.
Yeah. There's always the question of like, how do you start it and then start passing it around? Or what do you do if you don't have a culture ready to go? And apparently in some Turkish mountain villages, they used pine cones, which, similar to the ants, just have a bunch of interesting microbial species on them that get fermentation going. And then in Turkey and other countries, there have been some other historical references of plant materials like chamomile flowers, linden flowers, and nettle roots. And basically it seems like people have thrown a lot of different plants into milk to get it to start fermenting. And it's just a question of what microbes are on there. But these people used ants, which is obviously weirder and cooler.
Yeah.
I will say, in my search for weird historical yogurt recipes, the one other thing I came across was from Atlas Obscura, of course. This was about the Botai people of modern-day Kazakhstan. So they tamed wild horses in Central Asia thousands of years ago. And that meant they had access to horse milk, which, unlike many milks, you don't actually just want to drink straight up. It's really high in lactose. I've talked on Weirdest Thing before about how humans started drinking animal milk before any of us developed tolerance to lactose, which is wild. We really just brute forced it. But apparently, mare milk is so high in lactose that it has an almost medicinally laxative effect. So,
oh my God, really?
So nobody was drinking that straight unless they were specifically looking to have that kind of bad time. But you could make it good to drink by fermenting it. And that beverage is called kumis. And apparently, according to modern tasters, it's like champagne mixed with sour cream.
That sounds actually good.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite things.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm serious.
No, you're not wrong. Like, it's not two things I would think of to put together, but I'm willing to try.
I haven't thought of a combo, but I would try it.
Yeah. Because it is fizzy and alcoholic because it's like roll fermented.
It makes me think of like kefir.
Yeah, no, very similar.
Yeah.
But starting with that really sugary horse milk that you don't want to drink straight. And yeah, basically, since it has so much lactose in it, so much sugar, you really just churn it and then let it acidify and start bubbling. But apparently, the weird part about it that I found really fun is that they would take the liquid and they would transport it in leather bags. And apparently they would often hang them up where passerby could punch them. And that was that was to keep it agitated while it was fermenting.
Slap in the bag?
Awesome. Yeah, just slap in the bag. And yeah, that's all I found about that. But I just had to mention it because I think it's good. And those are all my yogurt facts for today.
I love that. There were so many. Somebody didn't know. Like from tiny ant to large horse.
Yeah, true.
Now what can't you make yogurt out of?
Can you? Is it possible to like find that the fizzy the what is it, the champagne sour cream?
Yeah, kumis. I think there are places that make it now.
I'm gonna be in LA in like 2 weeks. I feel like LA has to have it somewhere, right?
Let's see. According to Atlas Obscura, today companies produce it, but it's rarely fermented long enough to have more than 2% alcohol. It's usually made with fortified cow's milk. You need to actually go to Central Asia. You have to go to Central Asia and find some people raising horses.
I gotta go on a journey.
You gotta punch some bags.
Gotta go slap the bag. Well, all right. I'll go. Twist my arm.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with some more facts. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. With Mint, you can get the coverage and speed you're used to, but for way less money. The only thing you need to say yes to is making the switch and getting premium wireless for $15 a month. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number, along with all your existing contacts. I'm not in the market for a new mobile provider right now, but if I was, I would definitely be considering Mint Mobile. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/weirdest. That's mintmobile.com/weirdest. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Okay, we're back. And Jess, tell me about the horned hares.
Gladly. Okay, so a while back, there was a news story that y'all might have seen, like over the summer, late summer. And it was about the rabbits with what people were calling tentacle horns. They were over in Colorado. And they were real horns. They weren't squishy. They were horns. I don't know why people said tentacle horns. They were horns. And at first glance, it seems pretty not chill. You know, they're bunnies with weird horns all over their heads. And they're real ass horns. They're made of keratin, which is like the stuff that makes up our hair and nails. And the horns are on their heads, but sometimes also like on their faces. So what's up? What's going on with that?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
What's up, Doc?
So the horn-faced bunnies have a virus called Shope's papillomavirus. So this is also known as cottontail rabbit papillomavirus, also known as CRPV, which is what I will be calling it because it is easiest. So CRPV is mostly benign, though in a small amount of cases it can turn cancerous, but most of the time it just resolves and all the growths just fall off. The only other way it gets dicey is if the horns interfere with their ability to eat or to see, which is very sad, and I don't like to think about that. But if you're an Elden Ring enjoyer, this already sparks some Elden Ring connections already, and I won't get ahead of myself, but if you play Elden Ring, you're probably already thinking of Mohg, Lord of Blood, a demigod omen. So the omen are a sort of race or classification in Elden Ring, and they're known for many things, including their many tangled and unruly horns. And Mohg has one growing right into his eye, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll get back to that later. So let's go back to CRPV for a moment. So this virus was discovered back in 1933 by a virologist named Richard E. Shopes. And this dude was like a capital V virologist. So before all the horn-faced bunny stuff, he helped isolate influenza A in pigs. He was working with another dude on that. And then he begged to go with that other guy. The other guy's name was Paul A. Lewis. He was wanting to go with that guy on a big research trip to Brazil to go study yellow fever. But Paul A. Lewis said, "No, dude." And like, I'm dying to know the drama there. Like, did they not work well together? Like, why did Paul say no to Richard? Like, was there something juicier at play? Like a love story? I don't know. Who's to say? But it's perhaps for the best that Richard didn't go, because Lewis ended up accidentally contracting yellow fever from a laboratory incident and dying.
Oh, no.
In Brazil. So yeah, there's like a whole arc there, perhaps enough for an entire episode of Grey's Anatomy. It's crazy. But yeah, anyway, Richard E. Shopes. In the 1930s, this guy was successful in isolating virus after virus after virus. So he became known as like the virus hunter in the medical community. And as one does, he was out in New Jersey hunting rabbits. It's kind of like what medical doctors do, like shooting the shit. It's like golf in the winter. You hunt rabbits. And he noticed that some of these rabbits had these horn things on their heads. And he had seen those horns on the bunnies back in Iowa when he was there on farms studying the swine flu. So he was really curious. He started checking them out. He was sampling the bunnies, taking them back to the lab, sampling the horns, doing hashtag just little virologist things. And he was able to isolate the virus that he named after himself, Shope's papillomavirus, aka cottontail rabbit papillomavirus, aka CRPV. So one bunny gives the virus to another bunny. They grow a couple horns. It resolves, ideally, and the horns fall off. Everyone hops away, all fine and dandy. And like, yeah, it's cool and useful to know, like on its own, why the heck these bunnies grow weird horns. From like a population dynamics and ecosystems level, that's really important and cool and useful. Like, it'd be good to know if a new contagious cancer in rabbits suddenly appeared or suddenly became super deadly. Like, because if that happened, it could obliterate food webs in a ton of different ecosystems. Like if rabbits suddenly disappeared, think of all the overgrown plants and weeds, think of the hungry predators. Things could get pretty whack pretty quickly. So that's like a good enough reason right there to just like catalog and study CRPV on its own. And luckily CRPV is pretty chill. So like I said earlier, it pretty much just like resolves on its own. Like rabbits don't really get decimated in population by this. And a lot of the news stories that we saw over the summer do say that. They're like telling people, chill, tentacle horns are normal. Don't freak out.
Freak out.
Yeah, exactly. And also like humans can't catch CRPV, for the record. Like it goes between bunny species. And it spreads also mostly through bites from ticks and fleas as well. That being said, don't go cuddle the tentacle horn bunnies. It's still a good idea to keep your distance. You never
Leave
know
the
what
bunnies
kind
alone.
of yeah. Oh yeah.
Or just wild
for
animals.
one,
Yeah.
yes, for one, they're doing their own thing, and two, like you never know what kind of diseases can jump between species. Like zoonotic diseases are no joke. Mm-hmm. That's how really bad strains.
You don't want to be. You don't like you. My mom always says when
here we go
when you're getting tested for something, and like you don't seem to have anything. It's like, well, you could always end up having Feltman disease. It's like, you don't want to be, at any time, you could become patient zero of the bunny tentacle human crossover epidemic.
Exactly.
You do not want that to be you. No.
Just be cool, man. Just be cool. So yeah, that's a whole thing. But another slightly bigger reason why this was a cool discovery is that it was pretty foundational in our understanding of transmissible cancers. So transmissible cancers, terrifying thought, right? Yeah, these contagious bunny horns can somewhat rarely turn cancerous. There are some other kinds of transmissible cancer as well, but basically all in non-human animals, most famously like the Tasmanian devil, who have this contagious facial tumor disease that's cancerous. Very, very sad. But there is also a kind of a human version. There's like extra steps in the middle. And that brings me to the big reason that Shope's CRPV discovery matters. It's because it directly led to the connection of the human papillomavirus, aka HPV, like the STI, to cervical cancer. So, aka, this is like the reason that people with the cervix have to get pap smears. So, also like, man, getting a pap smear is like, it's like they access a part of your anatomy so deep. I didn't know it existed.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things where it's like, often when we're talking about screening procedures, it's so important to be like, listen, it's really manageable. Like, you got to do it. And with the pap smear, it's like, you do got to do it and you're going to be okay. But like, not going to lie, man, it's not a fun time.
It's like they
have fun. No,
it's like they reach your soul. Like,
yes.
Like how, I don't know. It feels, I don't know. It's weird,
but
man.
it's important.
The soul swab.
The soul swab, literally. So yeah, understanding how the bunny CRPV worked helped us understand how certain strains of HPV can cause cervical cancer. So in turn, researchers were able to develop the HPV vaccine, which I've gotten and is really neat and cool and great. And it was actually so interesting to be like 9 or 10 years old right as the HPV vaccine was becoming available, because it was like an active conversation being brought up by my doctor. And at the time, it was just like, whoa, medical advancements happening before my eyes. The future is now. And in hindsight, I'm like, of course, we're just now getting stuff that protects the cervix from cancer. Not that vaccine development is like a quick process in any way, but like we learned about the bunny stuff like in the early 1900s, and like now 10-year-old me is like, I'm getting the vaccine to protect me from cervical cancer. What can you do? Yeah, there's just been so little dedicated research done on the female reproductive system, and that just makes me sad sometimes. But also, just as a disclaimer, not all people with cervixes are women. Not all women have cervixes. I'm just using the annoying medical binary language for simplicity's sake. Disclaimer, asterisk. But shout out to Richard Shopes for saying, hey, those bunnies look weird because now my cervix is protected from cancer more.
Thank you, Shopes.
Yeah. And anyway, I was going to tie it back to Elden Ring because why not? Because when I say those bunnies look weird, I say they look weird like Elden Ring.
They must look really weird then.
Yeah, you should Google it. Google it. I highly recommend. So yeah, I mentioned this class of creatures in the game called the Omen. They totally have these tangled tentacle horns everywhere. They look basically one-to-one. Like, I would not be surprised if it was a direct inspiration. And if y'all don't mind, I'm going to round out my fact with a little Elden Ring lore moment. Even for non-knowers of Elden Ring, I'll make this completely digestible because it's just really, really cool. And the horns are truly so dead-ass similar, and they use the Omen and their bunny horns as an amazing storytelling tool. So, okay, here's my Elden Ring story time. Back in the day, before you, as the player, is in the Elden Ring world, the Omen were like pretty well regarded. They were high in command, and their horns, like the bunny horns, were considered divine gifts. But then a new queen came in, and she decided, for many complex and heart-wrenching reasons revealed in the DLC, she decided that the horns were out. She decided that they were like beastly and lowly and definitely not divine. So she ordered horns to be cut off, literally.
Wow.
Or beings with horns to be sent underground and to live in the sewers. But then she has 2 children, and they are both omen with the horns, which is unexpected because she is like a very traditionally beautiful woman. She's tall, long, blonde hair, like gorgeous goddess woman. So yeah, she's got those 2 kids with all the omen horns that she hates so much because of her trauma. And one of them is that Moog guy with the horn growing in his eye that I mentioned earlier, like a Shope's CRPV bunny. And Moog is like, yeah, I'm an omen. I'm cool and evil. And he makes a pact with this formless goddess and learns fire blood magic. And his twin brother Morgoth was a total mama's boy and renounced his blood and sealed some of it into a sick-ass sword. Really neat. And he cut off his bunny horns. And instead, so he didn't let it like poke his eye out and be super metal. He like cut his horns off. So yeah, it's like become evil bunny horn man or cut them off and like be a mama's boy. Crazy stuff. So yeah, that's just like scratching the surface of the Elden Ring lore. It is just a grain of sand on the beach that makes you the Elden Lord. Yeah, I could go on for hours. That's my Elden Ring bunny horn cervical cancer fact.
Wow.
The range.
Yeah, we tied a lot in there.
Yep, I couldn't resist.
I'd like to add that I feel very validated by this because when I was a kid, I thought jackalopes were real.
Yes.
Yes,
and this is why.
1000%.
This is why. Yeah.
Yeah. It turns out they kind of are, actually.
Totally. This is like why people were inspired to like go on that whole weird taxidermy fake journey, which is like
Amazing.
That's a whole other weirdest thing fact for somebody to do another day.
Absolutely. I would love to hear about that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take one more quick break, and then we'll be back with one more fact. Therapy in this economy? Yes, it's possible. Grow Therapy makes care more affordable, more flexible, and way easier to access. With Grow Therapy, you can find a therapist who takes insurance and get started in as little as 2 days. I honestly don't know who I'd be today without therapy, but it's taken a lot of work to find my practitioners. Grow makes it easy to find a therapist who fits you. They connect you with thousands of independent, licensed therapists across the U.S. who can work with your schedule, offering both virtual and in-person sessions, even on nights and weekends. You can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/weirdest today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/weirdest. growtherapy.com/weirdest. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan. Okay, we're back. And Liz, stop me from ever picking up feathers to hike again, I guess.
About to. Okay, so yeah, I guess we should start with the fact that you are not supposed to pick up and collect feathers of songbirds and various birds. There is a distinction about that, but let's just say blanket all birds for now until we get a little deeper into the fact here. So my teaser was how women put an end to the deadly feather trade. So we can thank 2 women for the end of the feather trade. And the history of that is why you cannot collect bird feathers that you find. Just take pictures of them, or I personally can recommend drawing or painting them if you'd like to keep a memory of them. So let me take you back to 1886. A journalist and ornithologist, Frank Chapman, went on a birdwatching mission in an unlikely place, an uptown shopping district in New York City. As he walked through the crowds and looked around, he was identifying birds, not in the trees, but ones that were adorning the hats of fashionable women. Over the course of just 2 trips, Chapman counted 542 hats, adorned with 174 different whole birds or their disembodied parts.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. The more extravagant hats flaunted not just feathers, but also the eyes, wings, bodies, legs, tails, carefully arranged with other natural accessories like
I just want to
leaves.
say,
Yeah.
when people say that autism is new and didn't exist, I want to point them toward this man's special interest in counting bird hats.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Oh my
Point them
God.
towards Frank. So Frank, on his birdwatching trips, saw at least 40 different bird species were represented among these hats. So 19th century women were clamoring for feathers. The more eye-catching, the better for their fancy hats. They used the feathers of woodpeckers, blue jays, bluebirds, owls, warblers, waxwings, and quails, but even more sought after than those songbirds were the dramatic wings and tails of ostriches, peacocks, pheasants, egrets, vultures, eagles, swans, herons, and turkeys. So this trend of feathered hat wearing can be traced all the way back to Marie Antoinette's fashion that just simply refused to die until enter our two Boston ladies, Harriet Hemingway, not Hemingway, Hemingway, Harriet Hemingway and Minna Hall. So Harriet was known, this came up in multiple articles that I read, so I really felt like I needed to share it. She was known for going bird watching in the 1880s wearing unfashionable white sneakers. And apparently at the time that was a
Same.
really big deal for everyone. I was like, I'm feeling a little called out here. But yeah, her white sneakers were mentioned a lot. So
Now I need to look up what they even meant by sneakers at that time.
what did that mean? That's honestly
All I
a
can
whole
see are
nother
Air
thing.
Force Ones.
Yeah, exactly. I'm picturing really chunky hokas, just
Yes,
huge shoes.
which I love.
I do too.
I'd save my ankles and knees.
Exactly. Yeah. Shout out to my plantar fasciitis.
Literally.
So we have these ladies to thank for the activism that eventually led to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and halted the avian massacre for the sake of hats. So 10 years after our guy Frank's bird hat, bird watching walk in New York City, Harriet read an article that described the harvesting of egret feathers in South Florida. So it really upset her because the article explained that egrets have these incredibly beautiful plumes that they only sport during their mating and nesting season. So the hunters would go down when they were at their most vulnerable, and the egrets were amazing parents and they would not leave the nest. So the hunters really easily harvested all of these egrets for their feathers and effectively would wipe out 2 generations at a time because they would take the parents for their feathers and the eggs would be left and they couldn't survive. So Harriet read an article about this, and this is what happened in my mind. I pictured her looking at her hat collection in horror because she was just taking part in the fashion and wearing these hats, and she read an article and was like, oh, hell no. And also, actually, we need to do something about this. So at the time, by the way, egret feathers were valued at $32 per ounce, which was twice the price of gold at the time.
What?
Whoa.
So highly, highly valuable industry
Holy
here.
moly.
And absolutely decimating egret populations and other birds for their feathers.
yeah.
So Harriet called up her cousin, Minna, and was presumably like, girl, we've got to stop wearing these hats and we need to save these birds. So the two of them called together tea meetings in Boston, which grew in popularity as their cause expanded from condemning plumage fashion to saving wild birds in general. So through these gatherings, Hemingway and Hall persuaded their influential friends to stop wearing feathered hats. And they also had them sign a boycott, which grew to a group of 900 wealthy, high-profile Boston women who agreed to totally boycott feather purchasing and feather wearing.
Well-
So their activism spread to other cities, and the Chicago Daily Tribune of October 24th, 1897, asked women to save wild birds from extinction by pledging that, quote, They would not wear birds or bird plumage of any kind except ostrich plumes on their hats, because ostrich plumes can be gathered without torturing or killing the bird. So
Sure.
ostrich feathers, okay. Pretty much every other feather, not the same. So as their gatherings grew, they realized, like, we're having these tea parties, they're going great, but like we need to expand, we need to get more official, we need to get some legislation on the books here. So they targeted established Boston bird experts to join their cause, which helped establish them further. So they named this growing organization the Massachusetts Audubon Society, which was
Wow.
in fact, these ladies really like kicked off the dominoes for a lot of really cool things. It was the first of many satellite Audubon societies that later became the nationwide Audubon Society that we know and love today. So what was known as the Bird Hat Campaign of the Audubon Society in Boston spread to Congress and influenced passage of the Lacey Act in 1900. The act prohibited interstate commerce of protected species taken in violation of state laws. Unfortunately, that law alone did not effectively slow commerce in feathers. It seemed like hunters were making too much money and they were just going to continue to do their thing, and it didn't really stop things. So at the urging of these sort of newly founded Audubon groups, President Theodore Roosevelt named Pelican Island the first federal bird reservation in 1903. So this is like not too long after they started their activism, and everyone is thinking, you know what? Yeah, birds are great and cool, and we should protect them and protect their environment. And then, of course, Roosevelt went on to name 9 more bird reservations in Florida and a total of 55 bird reservations and national game preserves, which eventually, of course, became the National Wildlife Refuge System that we know and love today. So, very cool. So, advocacy and awareness did not stop the plume trade, unfortunately. In 1911, 15 years after the Mass Audubon Society was founded, egrets were still being slaughtered for feathers, and William Hornaday calculated that the London market had consumed feathers from nearly 130,000 egrets in a 6-month period. So, absolutely catastrophic numbers
Oh my God.
of birds suffering because of this industry. So Mass Audubon knew that the most important thing they could do was to influence public sentiment and inspire Congress to enact more legislation prohibiting the importation of the skins or plumage of wild birds. In 1913, the Weeks-McLean Law, sponsored by Massachusetts Representative John Weeks and Connecticut Senator George McLean, passed. It prohibited spring shooting, night shooting, and interstate sale of wild game. So spring shooting being especially important because that's like breeding season, breeding plumage, all that business. Once again, despite the regulation, some hat makers continued to fashion feathery creations. The Brooklyn
What?
Daily Eagle reported on February 18th, 1914, just a year after the passing of these regulations, that Oregon hunters were making good money shooting hundreds of grebes a day for their breast feathers. Grebes are like very cool little water
I was just going to
birds.
say, I love the name of that. It sounds like a
yes.
cute little, like, a Final Fantasy
Yeah.
enemy or something. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that a lot.
They would totally fit into Final Fantasy. There's a bunch
Yeah.
of different kinds of grebes, but they would all fit.
I adore that.
So boxes of grebes were being sent to California factories labeled coyote skins.
Oh,
so
no,
they
they
were doing
didn't.
it on the sly. Yes.
Those bastards.
I know, absolute bastards. While the Weeks-McLean Law was ultimately not as effective as they had hoped, it became the model legislation for the landmark Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. So we started in 1886, and we're finally getting somewhere in 1918, which honestly, as far as like conservation and legislation goes, not the worst timeline imaginable.
Sure.
So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 made it, quote, unlawful to pursue, hunt, take, capture, kill, possess, sell, purchase, barter, import, export, or transport any migratory bird.
Period.
Whoa.
Full stop. Well,
The whole thing.
Yes, they made sure they included every possible iteration of moving a bird, killing a bird, anything that could possibly be construed.
Hell
so the Migratory Bird Treaty Act effectively put an end to the omnipresent bird and feather hats. The possession of feather and other parts of native North American birds without a permit is prohibited still to this day by the MBTA. I'm going to shorten so I don't have to say the whole thing every single time.
Yeah.
This protects wild birds by preventing their killing by collectors and the commercial trade for their feathers, and extends to all feathers regardless of how they were obtained. There is no exemption for molted feathers or those taken from the road, found on a hike, window-killed bird, no exception. So the reason that I was thinking about this is because it honestly comes up a lot on my Twitch stream. Someone will be like,
Sure.
I found this really cool feather. And I'm like, I love that so
Actually,
much for you.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about the Migratory Bird Treaty Act because you are not technically legally allowed to possess that feather. And we're like so far removed from the history of it and the fashion of it. But how quickly we could go back if
Totally.
people were allowed to possess feathers or collect feathers in any of these means. So
You're spreading the good word.
yes, exactly. Please leave feathers where you find them, admire them, take pictures of them, but please don't take them home with you, lest we go back to having hundreds of bird parts on hats, etc., all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I do want to say too, that when this law was passed, so exceptions do exist now for the feathers of legally hunted waterfowl or other migratory game birds. So like there are invasive species and game species that you are in fact allowed to keep the feathers of, like turkeys, for instance.
Oh,
if you find a
sure.
turkey feather, totally cool to keep that feather. Also like, you know, certain types of quail and pheasants and things like that. And obviously duck hunting, as we know, is like a huge thing. So waterfowl are another big part of that exception. But initially, there was not an exemption for indigenous peoples, and it was extremely harmful.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, because especially Alaskan indigenous folks who relied on birds for subsistence, hunting, and harvesting, and as well as for cultural and spiritual importance. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act was just like blanket put in place, of course, without thinking, you know, when has the government literally ever thought about indigenous
it's
people?
so unlike them. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So unlike them. So the MBTA rules were enforced upon indigenous populations who were, of course, not having the issues of overharvesting that the hat industry was perpetuating. So if we had been stewards of the land modeled after indigenous peoples in the first place, we would not have had the problem of the extreme overconsumption of birds and feathers that led to the treaty being necessary. So
Crazy concept.
yes, just wanted to make sure we address that. But all of that being said, shout out to Harriet Hemingway and Minna Hall for caring about birds. And
Indeed.
now no more bird hats, and please leave feathers where you find them.
I think people should commission their favorite artist to paint them a nice feather.
That is such a cool
true.
idea. If only we knew of such a bird artist who was up to the task.
Perhaps I paint burbs, maybe.
They sound cool. I don't know.
They sound really cool.
I did look up what sneakers were like in the 1800s.
Oh my God, amazing.
I had to know. Apparently, so the term sneaker was just when vulcanized rubber became a thing and they started making shoes with rubber soles.
Amazing.
They were so much quieter than wooden soled shoes that they called them sneakers.
What?
So,
Wait, holy Oh my God.
so there were many different kinds of shoes that could be called a sneaker. And they were mostly like geared towards some kind of athletics, because it started as like a luxury item. So like, why would you buy a weird rubber soled shoe unless it was like helpful for what you were doing?
Sure.
So it was like ladies playing tennis, like people at the beach.
And sneaking up on birds.
And bird watching.
Yeah, apparently sneaking up on birds.
Oh my
Absolutely.
God.
Perfect use case. And yeah, so like surprisingly early in like the early 1900s, Converse started up and did start making what looks very much like Converse canvas sneaker high tops. But yeah, apparently there are all these pictures, if you look up 19th century sneakers, of truly just like fancy boots that had rubber soles, and they were like a mannish sneaker. But for people to actively be calling her out as wearing unfashionable shoes, I think she was probably wearing the ones that look more like a soft leather slipper. If you ever did like jazz dance as a kid, they look like that with a rubber sole. So it was just sort of a very plain shoe with a sneaky sole.
Yes.
But anyway, that's something I learned just now because I couldn't leave it alone.
No, that's so. I love that linguistics, man.
Yeah, I never had thought about that.
Me neither.
Not once.
It seems so obvious now.
Yes, it does.
I never thought about shoes being wooden, like, and loud.
Yeah.
Right. Just clomping around, scaring all the birds away.
It would have
You can't have it.
Would have sounded like in Monty Python with the coconut.
Exactly. Yes. A group of friends just clomping through the woods, not a bird in sight.
Oh boy. Well, Liz, thanks so much for coming on again. Would you remind our listeners what your Twitch channel is so they can find you?
Yes, you can find me all over the internet as I Paint Burbs, BIRBS, and I am often doing just that, painting birds. So come say hi.
The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week is produced by all of our hosts, including me, Rachel Feltman, along with Jess Bodie, who also serves as our audio engineer and editor extraordinaire. Our theme music is by Billy Cadden. Our logo is by Katie Beloff. If you have questions, suggestions, or weird stories to share, tweet us at weirdest_thing. Thanks for listening, weirdos.